The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Subject, promotion announcement. Read immediately. I clicked it open, my heart hammering. Congratulations, Sloan. After careful review, you've been selected for promotion to Senior Project Manager, effective immediately. Please meet with Department Head tomorrow at 9 a.m. I read it 3 times just to be sure. 5 years. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, of proving myself, of delivering impossible projects on time. Finally! My hands were actually shaking as I forwarded it to my best friend, Kira. Her response came instantly. You did it! I was packing up, ready to celebrate, when my manager, Russell, appeared in my cubicle doorway. He was holding his phone, his expression unreadable. Got a minute? Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Of course. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. About that promotion. We need to talk. If only I'd known what he was planning. If only I'd realized that my success was his threat. Russell gestured for me to follow him to his office. The hallway felt longer than usual. Inside, he closed the door with a soft click that felt ominous. He didn't sit. Neither did I. Sloan, congratulations on the promotion, he said, but his voice had no warmth. I wanted to give you some advice. Advice? This is a big step up. Senior PM means more visibility, more scrutiny. People will be watching you, waiting for you to fail. His eyes were hard. I've seen promising people crash and burn at this level because they weren't ready. My jaw tightened. I'm ready. Are you? He leaned against his desk. Because I'm looking at your metrics and honestly, I have concerns. Your last project was delivered on time, but there were client complaints. Your team dynamics have been rocky. There's a perception problem. None of that was true. My last project was our highest rated in 6 months. What perception problem? That you're too aggressive, that you don't collaborate well. He smiled thinly. I'm just trying to help you understand what you're walking into. I left his office feeling like I'd been punched. Was he trying to help or trying to sabotage? I've worked at Cornerstone Analytics for 5 years. Russell has been my manager for 3 of those. When he first arrived, he seemed great, friendly, supportive, full of praise. He told me I had leadership potential. He said I reminded him of himself at my age, hungry and driven. For the first 6 months, he was my biggest advocate. Then things shifted. It started subtly. When I'd contribute in meetings, he'd reframe my ideas as his own. When I'd successfully close a difficult project, he'd take credit in emails to upper management. When I'd propose new initiatives, he'd dismiss them publicly, then implement them weeks later as his innovations. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but my colleague Hayden noticed. Russell's threatened by you, he said one day, after a particularly blatant idea theft. He's a weak manager who needs to be the smartest person in the room. I didn't want to believe it, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. And now, the day I got promoted past his level, he'd started undermining me immediately. The next morning, I arrived at the office early for my meeting with the department head. Vanessa was in her 50s, brilliant and no nonsense. I respected her immensely. Sloan, congratulations, she said, shaking my hand firmly. You've earned this. Thank you. I'm excited for the challenge. I want to be transparent with you, Vanessa continued. There was some internal debate about this promotion. You were the clear choice based on performance, but there were concerns raised about your readiness. My pulse quickened. Concerns from whom? Your manager expressed reservations. He suggested that perhaps waiting another year would give you time to develop your leadership skills more fully. Russell. Of course. Vanessa held up her hand. I overruled him. Your track record speaks for itself, but I need you to know that you'll be watched closely. Don't give anyone ammunition. I nodded, my mind racing. Russell had tried to block my promotion. When that failed, he'd planted seeds of doubt. He was actively working against me. I understand, I said, but inside something cold and focused was forming. If he wanted a fight, I'd give him one. A strategic, documented, devastating fight. I started paying closer attention. Over the next week, I noticed Russell's pattern extended beyond me. In the team meeting on Wednesday, Priya presented a market analysis she'd spent weeks developing. It was thorough, insightful. Russell interrupted her presentation 3 times to clarify points, effectively talking over her for half the meeting. Later, he sent a summary email to the department taking credit for her key insights. On Friday, I watched him dismiss Hayden's concern about a project timeline, calling it overthinking. 2 days later, when the timeline became a problem, Russell sent an email saying he'd identified a potential issue that the team had overlooked. Every interaction followed the same blueprint: take credit for successes, deflect blame for failures, maintain the image of indispensable leadership. I started keeping notes: date, time, incident, witnesses. I created a private folder on my personal laptop, backing up emails and documentation. Kira asked what I was doing. Building a case, I said. For what? For the moment when I expose him for exactly what he is. She looked worried. Sloan, be careful. He's still your manager. Not for long, I said. 2 weeks into my promotion, Russell called an unexpected team meeting. I want to talk about project allocation going forward, he announced. He pulled up a spreadsheet showing upcoming assignments. My name was conspicuously absent from the high-profile projects. Instead, I'd been assigned to 3 smaller maintenance projects, the kind given to junior staff. Sloan, given your new role, I thought you'd benefit from projects with less pressure while you acclimate to senior responsibilities, Russell explained smoothly. Hayden's eyes widened. Priya looked confused. Everyone could see this was a demotion disguised as consideration. I appreciate the concern, I said, keeping my voice level, but I'm ready for complex assignments. That's why I was promoted. I understand your eagerness, Russell said with a patronizing smile, but I need to consider the team's needs. These projects require experienced oversight. I have 5 years of experience and a perfect delivery record. Let's discuss this privately after the meeting. He dismissed my objection and moved on. After the meeting, I didn't go to his office. Instead, I went to Vanessa's. She needed to know what was happening. I was done being undermined quietly. Vanessa listened to my concerns with a furrowed brow. He reassigned your projects without consulting me? He's systematically sidelining me, I explained. Since the promotion announcement, he's questioned my readiness, spread concerns about my performance, and now he's removing me from meaningful work. She was quiet for a moment. Sloan, I need to be frank. If I intervene every time you have a conflict with Russell, it undermines both of you. You're senior management now. You need to navigate these dynamics yourself. My heart sank. But he's deliberately sabotaging. Do you have documentation? Emails showing deliberate interference? I hesitated. I had notes, but most of Russell's moves were verbal. In meetings, carefully crafted to have plausible deniability. Not yet, I admitted. Vanessa sighed. Then my hands are tied. I suggest you focus on excelling in whatever projects you're given. Prove him wrong through performance. I left her office feeling defeated. But that night I realized something important. Vanessa had essentially told me what I needed: documentation and undeniable proof. If Russell wanted to play games, I'd make sure the evidence was ironclad when I finally struck back. I just needed the right moment. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Russell more carefully. The pattern wasn't just about me. He was systematically undermining anyone who threatened his position. When Hayden proposed an innovative workflow solution, Russell praised it publicly, then privately killed it by deprioritizing necessary resources. When Priya's client gave glowing feedback, Russell forwarded it to upper management with a note emphasizing his guidance and oversight of her work. He maintained control through a careful system of credit theft and strategic undermining. But there were cracks. I noticed his own project deliverables were often late or incomplete. He relied heavily on the team to cover his weaknesses, then took credit for our work. One evening I was working late when I saw something interesting. Russell had left his office door open, his computer screen visible. An email was open from a vendor, thanking him for approving an expense that seemed unusually large. I couldn't read the details from where I stood, but my instincts tingled. Was something else going on beyond just bad management? I found an unexpected ally in the most unlikely place. Odette worked in finance, a quiet woman in her 60s who'd been with Cornerstone for 20 years. We'd chatted occasionally, but I didn't know her well. She stopped me in the break room one morning. "You're Sloan, right? Russell's team?" "That's right." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Be careful with him. He's not what he appears." "What do you mean?" "I can't say much, but I've processed expense reports for a long time. Patterns emerge." She handed me her coffee mug as if we were just having a casual conversation. Sometimes managers get creative with vendor relationships. Sometimes they create situations that benefit them personally while appearing to benefit the company. My pulse quickened. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying nothing specific," she interrupted. "I'm just saying that thorough documentation is valuable, and that the quarterly review is in 6 weeks. Audits happen during quarterly reviews." She walked away, leaving me standing there with a racing mind. Was Russell not just a bad manager, but a corrupt one? If so, that was bigger than my promotion. That was explosive. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. I started digging. Carefully, quietly. I reviewed old project files, looking for expense patterns. I cross-referenced vendor invoices with project budgets. I compared Russell's reported hours with actual deliverables. What I found was damning. On 3 separate projects in the last year, Russell had approved payments to a consulting firm called Stratford Solutions for services totaling nearly $75,000. But when I pulled the project reports, there was no documentation of what Stratford had actually delivered. No reports, no deliverables, no meeting notes. The invoices were vague: strategic consulting services and project oversight support. I searched for Stratford Solutions online. The company had a bare-bones website with stock photos and generic descriptions. No client list, no team members, no real presence. It felt like a shell company. I showed Kira what I'd found. "You think he's embezzling?" "I think he's paying someone for fake services and pocketing kickbacks. Or Stratford is his own company." "Sloan, that's serious. If you're wrong, I know. That's why I need more proof before I say anything. I needed access to financial records I wasn't authorized to see. I needed someone inside finance who could help. I needed Odette. Approaching Odette required delicacy. I couldn't directly ask her to break protocols, but I could share what I'd found and see if she'd help connect dots. We met for lunch at a small cafe 3 blocks from the office. I showed her the project files and vendor invoices on my personal laptop. She studied them carefully, her expression darkening. "Stratford Solutions," she murmured. "I've processed their invoices. They're always just under the threshold requiring additional approval. Very convenient." "Can you tell me if there's anything unusual about them?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Officially, no. But let's say, hypothetically, someone noticed that Stratford's bank account routing number appeared similar to one used for a personal account on a manager's expense reimbursement form. Hypothetically." My breath caught. That would be fraud. "Hypothetically," she repeated. "And if someone were to, say, mention this in an anonymous tip to internal audit, they might investigate, especially if quarterly review was coming up and they were already planning vendor audits." She closed my laptop. "I can't help you directly, but I can tell you that internal audit takes anonymous tips seriously, especially ones with specific details." She just handed me the roadmap. I knew what to do next. That week, Russell's behavior escalated. In Monday's team meeting, he announced that due to performance concerns, he'd be personally overseeing all my projects. "It's not punitive," he said with that condescending smile. "It's mentorship, making sure you're set up for success." Translation: micromanagement designed to make me fail. Every email I sent to clients now needed his approval. Every decision required his sign-off. Every project update went through him first. It was suffocating and deliberate. By Wednesday, I was behind on deadlines because Russell was too busy to review my work promptly. By Friday, I had 2 clients complaining about delays. Russell forwarded their complaints to Vanessa with a note. "As discussed, Sloan is struggling with the increased responsibility. We may need to reassess the promotion." I was furious, but I didn't react. I just kept documenting. Every delay he caused, every approval he sat on, every client email he intercepted. I was building 2 cases now, one for his management misconduct and one for potential fraud. The quarterly review was in 3 weeks. I just needed to hold on until then. Then everything would detonate. The team was fracturing under Russell's management. Priya came to me in tears one afternoon. He just told Vanessa that my market research was incomplete and reflected poor judgment, but he's the one who cut my timeline by 2 weeks and reduced my data access. "Did you document his changes to your project?" "Some of it, but most was verbal." I showed her my documentation system. "Start keeping detailed notes, timestamps, witnesses, everything. Not just for yourself, but for everyone." Hayden joined us. "I'm already doing that. Russell's a tyrant and everyone knows it. But nobody wants to challenge him because he's protected by his success narrative, which is built on our work," I said. "Exactly. So what do?" I looked at both of them. "We coordinate. We document everything collectively. And when the moment comes, we present a united front. One person complaining can be dismissed. 3 people with corroborated evidence? That's a pattern." Over the next week, the 3 of us quietly gathered information. We compared notes, backed up emails, documented incidents. We were building an airtight case, but I was the only one who knew about the financial fraud. That was my tactical nuclear option, and I was saving it for exactly the right moment. 2 weeks before the quarterly review, I decided to test something. I deliberately submitted a project update with a small, fixable error. Nothing major, just a transposed number in a budget projection. I sent it to Russell for approval, knowing he rarely read submissions carefully before signing off. He approved it within an hour. The next day, the client noticed the error and emailed Russell about it. He immediately forwarded it to Vanessa, CCing me. This is the kind of careless mistake that concerns me about Sloan's readiness for senior responsibilities. She needs more oversight. I was ready. I replied all with the original email showing Russell's approval, along with the timestamp. For context, this error was in the version you reviewed and approved yesterday. I appreciate your catching it, and I've sent the corrected version to the client. Vanessa responded within minutes. "Russell, if you approved the document, the error is shared responsibility. Let's discuss process improvements." It was a small victory, but it mattered. I'd publicly shown that Russell wasn't carefully reviewing work, just signing off and taking credit or assigning blame as convenient. Hayden sent me a private message. "That was beautiful." He's rattled. Good. Rattled people made mistakes. And I was counting on Russell to make a big one very soon. I started having strange dreams. In one, I was in a meeting room, presenting evidence against Russell, but when I opened my folders, all the documents were blank. In another, he was standing over me while I worked, growing larger and larger until he blocked out all the light. The stress was affecting me. I knew it. But I was also energized by a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my promotion anymore. It was about exposing a system of exploitation and possibly fraud. One morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. with a thought. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up Russell's LinkedIn profile. I looked at his previous employment, 3 jobs in 8 years, which seemed normal enough. But when I searched for news articles about the companies, I found something interesting. At his previous employer, a marketing firm in Chicago, there'd been a small news story about an internal investigation into expense fraud. No names were mentioned, but the timeline aligned with when Russell left that company. Coincidence? Maybe, but it added another piece to the puzzle. I screenshot everything and added it to my growing file. This wasn't paranoia, this was due diligence, and the picture being painted was damning. Help came from an unexpected place. My colleague Shauna from the legal department invited me to coffee. We'd worked together on a contract negotiation the previous year, but hadn't stayed close. "I'm not supposed to tell you this," Shauna said quietly, "but there's an internal audit scheduled for next week. Your department, routine quarterly review, but they're looking specifically at vendor relationships and manager approval patterns." My heart raced. "Really?" I saw the memo. Your manager's name was specifically mentioned as someone they're reviewing. She looked at me intently. "If you have information relevant to financial irregularities, now would be the time to bring it forward, anonymously or otherwise." "Why are you telling me?" She smiled grimly. "Because I've heard rumors about how he treats his team, and I've seen your work. You're good at what you do, and you don't deserve to be undermined." This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. I had 1 week to get my evidence to internal audit before their investigation started. If I timed it right, they'd walk into their audit with a roadmap of exactly what to look for. I thanked Shauna and went home to organize everything. The anonymous tip I sent to internal audit was detailed and specific. I provided project names, invoice numbers, vendor information, and timeline discrepancies. I included observations about approval patterns and suggested they cross-reference bank account information. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. The evidence would speak for itself. 3 days later, Russell was called into a meeting with finance and internal audit. He emerged 2 hours later looking pale and angry. He went straight to Vanessa's office and stayed there for another hour. The office buzzed with speculation. That afternoon, Vanessa sent an email to the team. Due to an ongoing internal review, Russell will be taking administrative leave effective immediately. Sloan will serve as acting manager until further notice. My phone exploded with messages from the team. "What happened? Did you know about this? Is he in trouble?" I responded professionally. "I'm sure the company will provide information when appropriate. Let's focus on our work and support each other during the transition." But privately, to Kira, I wrote, "Phase 1 complete. Now comes the hard part." Because Russell wasn't gone yet. He was on leave, and I knew him well enough to know he'd fight back. Russell sent me an email that evening. "I know you did this. I don't know how, but I know. You made a powerful enemy, Sloan. This isn't over." I didn't respond. Engaging would accomplish nothing. But I screenshot the email and added it to my documentation. Veiled threats from a manager under investigation would not play well if this escalated further. The next day, I met with the team. Everyone looked anxious and uncertain. "I know this is unsettling," I said, "but let's be clear about something. Our job is to deliver excellent work for our clients. That doesn't change based on management drama. What does change is that moving forward, you'll be evaluated based on your actual contributions, not on someone else's narrative about them." Hayden smiled. Priya looked relieved. Over the next week, I learned more about what the audit had found. According to Shauna's carefully worded updates, Stratford Solutions was indeed a shell company. The owner's name was partially redacted in documents she'd seen, but the bank account was linked to Russell through a family member. He'd been billing the company for fake consulting services for over 2 years, likely netting more than $150,000. That wasn't just bad management, that was criminal fraud. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The entire senior leadership would attend, including the CEO, our CFO, and the head of legal. Vanessa asked me to prepare a presentation on our department's projects and performance. "Be factual," she said. "Focus on results and metrics. This is not the time for drama." But I knew this meeting would determine everything. If the audit findings were presented publicly, Russell's career was over. If they tried to handle it quietly, he might get a golden parachute and a good reference, free to damage another company. I spent the weekend preparing 2 presentations. The official one Vanessa requested focused on project metrics and team performance, and a backup presentation, one I'd only use if necessary, documenting the pattern of misconduct that had affected the entire team. Kira helped me rehearse. "Are you sure about the backup?" she asked. "If you go nuclear, there's no coming back." "I'm sure," I said. "This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. If leadership tries to sweep this under the rug, the team deserves to know what we've been dealing with, and future employees deserve to be protected." Sunday night, I barely slept. Tomorrow would define everything. The morning of the quarterly review, I dressed in my sharpest suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, with heels that clicked with authority when I walked. I arrived early and set up my presentation in the conference room. The space was intimidating, a massive oval table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Leadership arrived gradually. Vanessa gave me an encouraging nod. The CEO, Harold, was a man in his 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The CFO, Annette, looked stern and all business. The head of legal, Warren, carried a thick folder. We began with standard reports, financials, client satisfaction, project pipelines. Everything was normal until Warren spoke. "Before we move to department reviews, I need to address a matter that's come to our attention." He opened his folder. "Our internal audit identified significant irregularities in vendor payments authorized by Russell Price over the past 2 years." The room went very quiet. Harold's expression hardened. An investigation confirmed that Russell created a fraudulent consulting company and billed Cornerstone for services never rendered. The total amount is approximately $167,000. Gasps around the table. Vanessa looked shocked. She hadn't known the full extent. Warren continued. "Russell has been terminated for cause. We've referred the matter to law enforcement, pending criminal investigation." Harold looked at me. "Sloan, you've been serving as acting manager during the investigation. What can you tell us about the team's current state?" This was my moment. I could play it safe, give the standard presentation, let leadership pat themselves on the back for catching the fraud, or I could tell the whole truth. "The team is relieved," I said carefully, "not just because of the financial fraud, but because Russell's management style was destructive long before we knew about the embezzlement." I pulled up my backup presentation. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to show you what the team has been dealing with." I displayed the documentation, the timeline of idea theft, the pattern of credit-taking and blame deflection, the systematic undermining of team members who showed initiative or talent, the micromanagement designed to cause failure, testimonials from Hayden, Priya, and 3 other team members, all corroborating the same patterns. Vanessa's face went pale. She'd known some of this, but seeing it documented and quantified was different. Harold leaned forward, studying each slide intently. "This is extensive documentation. How long have you been tracking this?" 18 months, I said, since I noticed the pattern wasn't personal to me but systemic to his management approach. Annette, the CFO, spoke up. "Why didn't you report this through proper channels earlier?" It was a fair question. "I tried," I said, "multiple times, but Russell was skilled at maintaining plausible deniability. Most misconduct was verbal. When I raised concerns, I was told to handle it myself or that I was being too sensitive." I looked at Vanessa. This wasn't meant as an attack, but she needed to hear it. "The reality is that Russell built a protective narrative around himself. He was seen as successful because he took credit for his team's work. By the time anyone realized what was happening, he'd been promoted twice and had strong advocates in leadership." Harold's jaw tightened. "So the fraud wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a larger pattern of self-serving behavior." "Yes," I said, and if the anonymous tip hadn't triggered the audit, this pattern would have continued. More team members would have left or burned out. More company resources would have been misused. Warren made notes furiously. This could expose the company to liability if employees can demonstrate they reported misconduct that was ignored. I'm not interested in suing the company, I interrupted. I'm interested in making sure this doesn't happen again. We need better systems for reporting management misconduct. We need regular skip-level reviews. We need accountability. After a heavy silence, Harold spoke. You're right. Sloan? You've shown exceptional courage and leadership not just in documenting this, but in protecting your team while building a case. That's exactly the kind of management this company needs. He looked around the table. I'm making the acting manager position permanent. Sloan, you're officially department manager, effective today, with a compensation adjustment reflecting the level. My breath caught. It was more than I'd expected. Vanessa smiled, this time with genuine warmth. You've earned it, and I owe you an apology. I should have taken your concerns more seriously earlier. Thank you, I said. Annette added, we'll be implementing the oversight changes you recommended, and we'll be conducting a company-wide review of management practices to identify any similar patterns elsewhere. The meeting concluded with action items and timelines. As people filed out, Harold pulled me aside. What you did was risky. You could have been fired or blacklisted. Why take that chance? I thought about it, because staying silent meant accepting a broken system, and I wasn't willing to do that anymore. Not for myself, and not for the people I work with. He nodded slowly. That's leadership. Not the title, but the choice. That afternoon, I called a team meeting. Everyone was buzzing with rumors about what had happened in the quarterly review. I laid it out plainly. Russell has been terminated. The reasons are both financial fraud and management misconduct. Some of you contributed documentation that helped make the case for the latter. Thank you for your courage. Relief flooded the room. Hayden actually applauded. Additionally, I've been promoted to department manager. Not acting. Permanent. Which means some things are going to change. We're going to have monthly skip-level reviews with Vanessa. We're going to have transparent project allocation based on merit and development goals, not politics. And we're going to have a zero-tolerance policy for credit theft or blame deflection. Priya raised her hand. What happens if we have concerns about management? About you even? You report them. To Vanessa, to HR, anonymously, if you prefer. I never want someone on this team to feel the way I felt over the past year. Powerless and unheard. The meeting ended with a feeling I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine team unity. That evening, Kira and I finally had that celebration dinner I'd been planning since the promotion announcement. You did it, she said, raising her glass. You outsmarted him. I outlasted him, I corrected. Big difference. 3 months later, the department was transformed. Projects were running smoothly. Team morale was the highest it had been in years. Client satisfaction scores were up 23%. I still thought about Russell sometimes, not with anger, but with a kind of clinical curiosity. What makes someone so insecure that they need to diminish everyone around them? What drives a person to steal not just credit, but actual money? I learned he'd taken a plea deal to avoid prison, but he had a criminal record now and would likely never work in management again. Some former colleagues said I should feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt validated, but not victorious. What I'd learned was bigger than one bad manager. I'd learned that systems perpetuate themselves until someone forces a change. That documentation is power. That speaking up is terrifying but necessary. Most importantly, I learned that my worth was never dependent on someone else's acknowledgement. Russell tried to make me small. He failed not because I outsmarted him, but because I refused to shrink. If only I'd known sooner that standing up for yourself isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. And that recognition, the kind that matters, comes from doing the right thing even when it's hard. That's not something anyone can take away or undermine. It's something you build yourself, one difficult choice at a time.